prove they did not father the children of the two women standing across from you. DNA will prove you right today when the results are revealed. Claims he had a one-night stand with one of you
because I didn't know nothing about her until she was in the hospital giving birth to the baby. What was the baby name? She told me it was going to be Ariana Danielle Glover. Where did you come up with that from? If he's not the father, where you get this name from? Homegirl is in the hospital. I said, who in the hospital? What they got to do with you? Oh, she's having my baby.
So you were on your way to the hospital with your son, not knowing what girl you would see.
I would have knew you too for 8 years.
But if you knew the factors in your son's life, you should know who's in and out his life.
We are
father a child with a non-factor.
The atmosphere inside Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom holds a weight that feels almost physical, an emotional heaviness formed by years of unresolved relationships, whispered accusations, and the kind of complicated family ties that stretch far beyond the surface. This particular hearing feels even denser, because the people who have gathered here have reached a moment where biology, memory, betrayal, and duty intersect. The courtroom is filled with mothers, sons, former partners, and children whose futures depend on facts that can no longer remain untested. Judge Lake sits at the center of this emotional tangle, fully aware that the room is divided not just by two sides, but by inner conflicts each person carries. She is known for her direct yet compassionate approach, a balance that reflects the relationship between law and justice, both of which must coexist even when the truth is uncomfortable. As she reviews the details of the case in front of her, she understands that today's matter is not just about paternity. It is about the consequences of choices, the reliability of memory, and the legal expectations placed on individuals when those choices lead to life-changing outcomes. The hearing opens with the presence of Miss Glover and her two sons, Donal and Javon, who have come forward to defend themselves against allegations about fatherhood. They arrive with visible tension, trying to protect their family's dignity while also struggling with their own doubts. Across the room stand Miss Staton and Miss Jackson, two women who insist that these young men are fathers to their daughters. Their posture, voices, and certainty signal that they believe the DNA evidence will finally validate their claims. Each person seems to be clinging to a different version of the truth, and Judge Lake watches carefully as these conflicting perspectives collide. The atmosphere resembles the emotional depth one hears in Truth Changes Everything podcast or the Game Changing Attorney podcast, where legal cases become windows into human psychology. This courtroom, however, is not a podcast set. It is the evidence stage in a divorce case, like Environment, where truth must be separated from assumption. Every sentence spoken carries weight. Every facial expression reveals fear, hope, or defensiveness. Judge Lake's expertise lies not only in applying the law, but in identifying honesty amid emotional chaos. Miss Glover is adamant that her son Donal is not the biological father of one of the children in question. Her reasoning stems from the fact that she had no knowledge of the relationship, no warning about a pregnancy, and no connection to the woman who now stands before the court. She calls the child a maybe baby, a phrase that captures the uncertainty at the center of this conflict. For Donal, the issue is more complicated. He believed he had been responsible, committed, and honest. Yet somewhere along the line, mistrust had seeped into the story, creating doubts strong enough to require scientific confirmation. As the courtroom absorbs these details, it becomes clear that this is not simply a disagreement between adults. It is a confrontation between lived experiences and biological certainty. This tension reflects timeless questions within the concept of justice in jurisprudence. How much weight do personal narratives carry when set against scientific evidence? When does emotional truth matter? And when does the law demand neutrality? Judge Lake navigates these layers smoothly, reminding everyone that only verified facts can guide the final decision. Meanwhile, Miss Staton expresses confidence that Donal is indeed the father of her daughter. She describes the emotional, intimate, and lengthy relationship she shared with him, insisting that she had no doubts during the window of conception. Her statements, however, begin to unravel as more details come forward. She eventually acknowledges that another man may also have been involved during the same period. This admission changes the momentum of the hearing. It suggests that the story is more complex than originally presented, aligning with numerous DNA test cheating stories, where the truth challenges long-held assumptions. This multi-layered conflict is familiar territory for viewers who follow full episodes of reality-based paternity and family court shows. But in this courtroom, the stakes are deeply personal. It also reflects themes common in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals confront past mistakes in search of healing and clarity. Here, the courtroom setting becomes not only a place for legal decision-making, but a space where people must confront the consequences of their choices. From a legal perspective, Judge Lake must consider not only the emotional narratives, but also applicable doctrines such as adverse inference in Evidence Act principles, where failure to disclose or inconsistencies in testimony might weigh against credibility. Although this is not a divorce trial, the underlying emotional and structural dynamics resemble those found in the Divorce Course podcast, where relationships break under pressure, leaving the legal system to sort out the aftermath. The presence of Mr. Brady, another possible father, adds an additional layer of complexity. His involvement shows how fragile assumptions about family can be, especially when timelines overlap and communication breaks down. His appearance outside the courtroom serves as a reminder that no matter how certain someone may feel, only DNA can confirm the biological truth. Throughout the hearing, Judge Lake remains steady, guiding each participant toward clarity. She listens, asks focused questions, and ensures that every detail is presented properly. Her experience shines as she navigates inconsistencies, ensuring that the rights of the child, often overlooked in adult disputes, remain at the heart of the case. The process resembles deliberations that might unfold in the Supreme Court child support context, where the accuracy of biological relationships determines long-term legal and financial obligations. As emotions rise, the families express fear, confusion, anger, and disappointment. Donal becomes emotional when discussing the bond he has formed with the child he believes might be his. He speaks of caring for her, visiting her, and wanting to play an active role in her life. This space, between affection and uncertainty, is one of the most painful places a person can stand. Many individuals who undergo DNA testing find themselves in similar situations, where results can either redefine or reinforce relationships, often unexpectedly. Judge Lake's role becomes part investigator, part counselor, part interpreter of the law. She emphasizes the importance of truth, not to cause pain, but to create stability for the children involved. In describing her decisions, she echoes themes heard in legal analysis broadcasts like the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, reminding both sides that honesty is essential, even when uncomfortable. Her approach also mirrors educational discussions heard in adoption-related segments and adoption stories, where biological ties matter but emotional bonds are equally significant. By the time the courtroom prepares for the DNA results, the emotional stakes have reached their highest point. Each individual stands on the threshold of a truth they cannot control. Whether the results align with their hopes or fears, they will irrevocably shape the future. Judge Lake pauses, ensuring that everyone understands the gravity of what is about to occur. These results will not only determine legal responsibility, but also shift the emotional structure of these families. The tension in the room deepens, mirroring the narrative tone often seen in long-form investigative storytelling, where each revelation reshapes the entire picture. The adults in the room brace themselves, some hopeful, some dread-filled, some resigned. And although no one verbally states it, every person silently acknowledges that no matter how prepared they may appear, nothing can truly soften the impact of biological truth. In this moment, the courtroom becomes a representation of how modern society relies on DNA, a scientific standard that can validate relationships or dismantle them. It reveals that emotional commitment, personal memory, and promises cannot stand against biological evidence when the law requires certainty. This dynamic represents the living tension between law and justice that Judge Lauren Lake navigates with precision. And with that, the first set of results is about to be read. The silence that settles over Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom as the DNA envelope is prepared for opening feels almost ceremonial, the kind of silence that precedes irreversible truth. Every person stands internally suspended between dread and anticipation. It is in these moments, before the facts are spoken aloud, that the weight of family uncertainty becomes most visible. The adults carry not only personal hopes, but the responsibility of shaping the identities of the children at the center of the dispute. The courtroom, usually a space defined by rules, procedures, and structured order, becomes a place where human vulnerability is laid bare. Judge Lake surveys the room, her expression a blend of empathy and professional composure. She understands the ways DNA testing has transformed modern family law. Once, parentage was assumed through relationships, promises, and outward appearances. Today, a laboratory swab has the power to unravel or confirm bonds that have existed for months, years, or even lifetimes. She has seen countless families reach this moment, and she knows that for many individuals, people regret taking a DNA test not because the truth is unwelcome, but because their hearts were unprepared for it. The science does not lie, but the truth it reveals can be both liberating and destabilizing. As she prepares to reveal the findings, the emotional history of each person in the courtroom feels present in the air. Miss Glover stands firm in her belief that her son Donal is not the father, but her heart still carries a trace of protective fear. Donal himself looks conflicted, his shoulders stiff from the internal battle between wanting to know and wanting to preserve the bond he has formed. Miss Statton's expression shifts between confidence and anxiety, revealing that her certainty about the fatherhood is more complicated than she originally presented. Her posture shows the strain of living between truth and narrative, between what she hoped would be true and what she knows might be revealed today. Judge Lauren Lake opens the envelope with the practiced steadiness that comes from years of presiding over paternity cases. Her role requires emotional neutrality, but she recognizes the humanity in every decision she delivers. When she reads the result declaring that Donal is not the father, the reaction inside the room is immediate and raw. The air seems to collapse under the pressure of heartbreak and disbelief. Although no dramatic outbursts occur, the emotional impact is so profound that it reverberates in the silence that follows. For Donal, the result is both a confirmation and a devastation. He now understands why his instincts whispered doubt, yet he also feels the loss of the connection he believed he had built. The little girl he cared for, the moments he cherished, and the responsibility he felt now shift into a new category, bond without biology. In the legal world, this kind of emotional dislocation is familiar, often discussed in family law podcasts and platforms like Truth Changes Everything podcast and the Divorce Course podcast, where people confront truths they never anticipated. But inside this courtroom, the experience is much more intimate. Miss Glover attempts to process the news with composure, but the mixture of sorrow, pain, and relief moves across her face. She had doubted the child's paternity from the beginning, but doubt does not insulate a heart from the ache that comes with confirmation. She understands what it means to support a child emotionally, even when the child is not biologically connected to the family. She also recognizes what it means for her son to lose a role he had slowly allowed himself to accept. Miss Statton's reaction reveals layers of truth that had remained unspoken. Her earlier confidence dissolves into a resignation that acknowledges she had not been fully honest about the timelines. Her silence carries the weight of a personal reckoning, the realization that the emotional structure she had built around one man's assumed fatherhood had finally collapsed. Her acknowledgement of another possible father becomes more than a statement. It becomes a surrender to the accuracy of DNA testing and the reality that biology does not bend to preference. Judge Lake manages the room with calm authority, reminding everyone that truth, though painful, creates the clarity necessary to reshape the future more responsibly. She understands the legal implications of the result, the potential adjustments to child support responsibilities, and the emotional aftermath that will follow. Her rulings reflect the principles rooted in the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where accuracy must guide decisions, even when the consequences are emotionally heavy. As the court transitions into the discussion of additional paternity concerns related to Miss Jackson's situation, the atmosphere shifts once again. Another possible father, another timeline, and another complexity arise. The presence of multiple potential fathers reflects a pattern that Judge Lake has seen many times: relationships woven through moments of desire, instability, and miscommunication. These narratives often echo themes found in DNA test cheating stories, where secrecy and uncertainty leave families entangled in confusion. Judge Lake emphasizes that while emotions can influence actions, the law requires precision. Her approach mirrors discussions in legal analysis on platforms such as the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where professionals highlight the difference between emotional narratives and evidentiary standards. In this case, every detail matters. The timelines, the admissions, the inconsistencies, and the historical patterns all influence how she interprets the testimony presented. Yet ultimately, only DNA testing can provide unquestionable answers. When the next wave of revelations emerges, admissions of relationships with additional partners, overlapping timelines, and hidden truths, the courtroom experiences another shift. Judge Lake listens attentively, recognizing that many individuals enter parenthood without the stability or clarity needed to support children effectively. Her questions are steady, aiming not to shame, but to uncover what is necessary for legal determination. She notes how the truth evolves with each admission. People often underestimate how crucial transparency is in legal settings. During discussions involving adverse inference in Evidence Act principles, courts frequently consider whether individuals withheld information or provided misleading statements. In this hearing, every new confession affects trust, credibility, and the interpretation of events. These dynamics are not merely procedural. They shape the entire atmosphere of the courtroom. When attention turns to the children themselves, Ariana, Paris, and London, the energy in the room softens. Regardless of adult missteps, the children remain the most vulnerable participants. Judge Lake consistently brings the focus back to their needs, reminding everyone that fatherhood is more than biology. It is responsibility, presence, and commitment. She acknowledges that truth, no matter how painful, will eventually benefit the children by establishing clear parental ties. The courtroom also becomes a space for reflection. For some adults, The process resembles the emotional honesty found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals confront their past choices to seek a healthier future. Miss Amos, for instance, experiences a moment of reckoning as she admits to being involved with more than one partner during the conception windows of her children. These confessions require courage, not because the truth is unknown, but because speaking it aloud solidifies it. Her acknowledgement of multiple relationships, including an ongoing connection with another man, reshapes the legal landscape surrounding both of her children. Her desire to maintain a relationship with Mr. Johnson, juxtaposed against her history of continuing involvement with someone else, creates a conflict that Judge Lake must address with both compassion and firmness. The court must navigate not just biology but emotional reliability, stability, and honesty. Mr. Johnson's demeanor shows visible hurt and confusion. He has built bonds with the children he believes are his, and the possibility that those bonds could be challenged by the DNA results weighs heavily on him. His emotional turmoil reflects a common pattern discussed in adoption-related content and adoption stories, where non-biological parents experience deep fear at the prospect of losing the children they love. Yet he remains composed, committed to learning the truth regardless of the outcome. Judge Lake prepares the room for the next set of results. The anticipation mirrors the earlier tension, but carries a heightened emotional weight because the children affected are older, and the bonds formed are deeper. The thought that biology might contradict or confirm these attachments stirs every heart in the room. The stakes feel higher, and the outcomes will determine not only legal obligations but emotional futures. As the envelope is brought forward, the audience feels the gravity of the moment. Judge Lake reminds everyone that the purpose of the court is to ensure that every child has clarity regarding their identity, support, and familial structure. This guiding principle echoes high-level discussions seen in debates resembling Supreme Court child support cases, where the accuracy of parental identity directly influences lifelong responsibility. With deliberate calm, Judge Lake prepares to read the next results. The courtroom feels suspended in a dense emotional stillness as Judge Lauren Lake prepares to read the next results. Each person in attendance, family members, partners, former romantic connections, and extended relatives, carries the weight of anticipation that only DNA truth can create. The walls of the courtroom seem to absorb the tension, reflecting back the realities these individuals must now confront. For some, the results will be a relief. For others, they will be the catalyst that permanently alters the course of their family narrative. Judge Lake, familiar with this emotional landscape, approaches the task with the blend of composure and empathy that has become her hallmark. Over the years, she has witnessed countless families stand at the intersection of scientific truth and emotional complexity. She understands how deeply these cases illustrate the ongoing tension between the relationship between law and justice, a theme often examined in academic and professional circles, including discussions like those found in legal analysis platforms or investigative shows. The law supplies the structure, the science delivers the proof, but justice emerges only when clarity is paired with responsibility. As she opens the envelope concerning the children Paris and London, the courtroom becomes quiet in a way that goes beyond silence. It becomes internal. Every adult is caught in personal reflection. Miss Amos, whose emotional disclosures and confessions have already reshaped the narrative of her relationships, stands bracing for a truth she cannot manipulate. Her emotional posture reveals both fear and acceptance. She already knows that the truth is inevitable. Her only uncertainty is whether it will match her hopes. Mr. Johnson, meanwhile, appears both anxious and sorrowful. The possibility of losing the bond he believes he shares with London, the child he has cared for most deeply, creates a pressure visible on his face. Parenting, after all, is not simply biological. It is emotional investment, repeated presence, and a sense of purpose. His struggle reflects the emotional reality often explored in adoption stories, where parental identity is shaped over time rather than through genetics alone. Yet, under the law, biology matters, and today that biology will be confirmed or contradicted with undeniable certainty. Judge Lake reads the result for Paris first, revealing that Mr. Johnson is the biological father. The initial tension in the room releases slightly, one truth established, one identity affirmed, but relief is short-lived. The next result, concerning London, carries far heavier emotional weight. London is older, the bond stronger, the emotional history deeper. The courtroom settles once again into anticipation as Judge Lake prepares to read. When she announces that Mr. Johnson is also London's father, the emotional impact ripples across the room. There is visible relief from Mr. Johnson, whose shoulders drop slightly as he takes in the confirmation. His connection to the child he calls his roll doll is secured, not only emotionally but legally. The anxiety that consumed him during the waiting period dissolves into a sense of affirmation. The courtroom, which spent so many minutes suspended in uncertainty, finally breathes again. Miss Amos expresses a mixture of happiness and grief. While she is relieved that Mr. Johnson is the father of both children, the strain of their relationship has become undeniable. Her repeated involvement with another man during and after her pregnancies has eroded the trust necessary for partnership. When she attempts to express a desire to rebuild the relationship, Mr. Johnson's response, calm, firm, and final, reflects the emotional truths revealed throughout the hearing. He acknowledges the bond with his children, but makes it clear that romantic reconciliation is impossible. In this moment, the courtroom becomes not only a legal space, but a place where emotional closure must occur. Judge Lauren Lake approaches the final phase of the hearing with the clarity and wisdom expected of her position. She emphasizes that while biology has been confirmed, the emotional and practical responsibilities of parenting have just begun. In her explanation, she echoes themes commonly heard in truth-seeking platforms like Truth Changes Everything podcast or professional breakdowns such as those on the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where factual revelations must be followed by responsible action. She highlights that co-parenting requires mutual respect, consistent communication, and a willingness to put the children first, qualities that transcend romantic disappointment. This message reflects deeper judicial philosophies about fairness, responsibility, and accountability. It also touches on broader legal concepts like those found within the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where the law aims not only to determine facts, but to guide individuals towards socially responsible behavior. Miss Amos, hearing this guidance, appears reflective. She seems to recognize that her decisions have created a long-term challenge that will require maturity to resolve. Her expression carries a sense of acceptance, an understanding that while she cannot repair the romantic relationship, she can still commit to building a healthy environment for her children. In many ways, her journey mirrors the emotional honesty found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals confront past mistakes in the hope of creating better futures. Mr. Johnson, though hurt, listens to Judge Lake's guidance with seriousness. His desire to support his children is unmistakable. The judge acknowledges his dedication and reminds him of his responsibilities moving forward, echoing principles applied in high-level legal decisions such as those involving Supreme Court child support matters. His role now extends beyond biology. It requires emotional consistency, financial support, and a willingness to collaborate with the mother of his children. As Judge Lake transitions back to the earlier portion of the case concerning Donal and Miss Staton, she reflects briefly on the emotional turbulence exposed through their testimony. Donal, who discovered through DNA testing that he is not the father of the child he had grown attached to, faces a path of emotional healing. Judge Lake recognizes that these moments often lead individuals to internal conflict, grief over loss, relief from uncertainty, and anger over unspoken truths. The effect resembles the complex emotions described in DNA test cheating stories, where individuals must navigate the aftermath of revelations they never saw coming. Miss Staton, now confronted with the truth that Donal is not the father, is left to reevaluate her own narrative. The courtroom observes her internal recognition that her earlier certainty was misplaced, shaped by hopes rather than facts. Judge Lake reminds her that clarity, though uncomfortable, gives the child the opportunity to eventually know their true biological father. In family law, the establishment of accurate parentage is not about blame. It is about long-term stability. The court then acknowledges the broader implications of the case, where lies, omissions, and emotional entanglements have led to confusion that deeply affected multiple lives. Judge Lake explains how the legal process, especially the evidence stage in a divorce case or paternity matter, requires honesty to operate properly. Courts rely on evidence, consistency, and transparency. When individuals provide conflicting information, the legal process becomes slower and more complicated, potentially harming the children at the center of it all. She also addresses the legal idea of adverse inference in Evidence Act principles, noting that when people fail to disclose relevant information or mislead the court, it can affect how their statements are interpreted. Her explanation reinforces a central theme of the entire hearing. Truth must guide the legal process. Emotional attachment, personal history, and desire cannot override factual accuracy. As the hearing nears its conclusion, Judge Lake revisits the importance of personal accountability. She speaks to the adults about repairing communication patterns, setting healthy boundaries, and prioritizing their children's needs above their own frustrations. Her final remarks reflect not only legal expertise but human insight. She recognizes that the courtroom has acted as a mirror for each individual, forcing them to confront truths they may have avoided in their personal lives. The emotional atmosphere softens as the families absorb the judge's guidance. Despite the intensity of the discoveries, a sense of resolution begins to emerge. The truth, though painful for some, has established clarity. Bonds that were uncertain are now confirmed, and those that were believed to exist but did not have been respectfully acknowledged. The courtroom's role is complete, not in mending relationships but in removing ambiguity. Judge Lake concludes the session by reminding everyone that healing, cooperation, and maturity are essential moving forward. These qualities, she emphasizes, will determine whether the children at the center of these disputes grow up in a stable environment. Her message echoes discussions found in thoughtful family law analysis and conflict resolution platforms, including the Divorce Course podcast, where truth becomes the foundation for long-term responsibility. When the hearing adjourns, the courtroom slowly empties, but the echoes of the decisions remain. Each adult walks away with a new reality, some relieved, some heartbroken, but all clarified. Their next steps will shape the upbringing, safety, and emotional well-being of the children they share. And as Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom doors close, the truth, unfiltered, scientific, undeniable, continues to stand as the final authority that guided the resolution of their stories.